for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, howdy. Good Sunday morning. Good. Oh, Sunday. Well, I had Friday off, so it feels like Monday. So I don't know. I am way off my game because I had way too much time off and have managed to accomplish nothing in that amount of time. So welcome. I'm TC. This is MBRR Media. I'm vainly promoting my own show right now, 2 different places, while I'm waiting for the audience to build. So if you're coming in, say hi, hit the like button, hit the thumbs up, and let everybody know that you're here. So yeah, we're gonna have a very interesting guest on today. He is the most left-leaning, politically connected, fringe radical, hate group belonging individual I could find to have on. No, I'm kidding. That's absolutely not true. In fact, I got to give him credit. When I reached out to him and said, "Hey, would you like to come on the show?" He called me. Well, we exchanged numbers, and he called me, and he right out of the gate, I thought I was going on his show because he started vetting me. And he asked him, really, are you part of any PACs? Are you part of any, fringe groups? Well, I am part of a fringe group. I completely, lied and told him I wasn't. I'm a paleo libertarian. You don't get much more fringe than that. Think Rothbard, Mises, Pat Buchanan, all the people that, Ron Paul, those kinds. That's kind of the vein of where I'm at. And so, yeah, I guess you could say I'm part of a fringe group that people wouldn't want to be involved with. But other than that, no, we're good. I want to give a shout out, as always, to my in memoriam permanent show producer, Ryan, and his family, especially his mom, Betty, for all the support and work that they've done in helping keep things going here on this end. To all my channel members, thank you so much for what you do. You guys keep the internet going. You keep the electricity on. And subscribers, we'd always love to have more of you, but the ones that are subscribed and watch, we are very thankful for you. And if you would like to become a channel member, there's a little button down below that lets you do that. And then when you come back, if you're watching this on replay, there's a little hype button. You hit that hype button, and that pushes the show out into the algorithm. So thank you very much. Everybody knows that I'm an enemy of regimists. I'm an enemy of the Uniparty as it stands right now. I'm an enemy of the deep state. And sadly, yesterday being the 4th of July, when we were supposed to be celebrating our independence and our freedom from tyranny, lots of people went out and celebrated being free from tyranny by not firing off fireworks because we are free and we don't want to get tickets for shooting off fireworks. So if you're crazy enough to think that we still live in a free country, all you need to do is look at some of the laws that you have to deal with and who writes those laws, who votes for those laws, and who signs those laws into the books, if you will. I don't care if it's a state of Minnesota. I don't care if you're watching in your own state, on the East Coast, the West Coast, or the Gulf Coast, Alaska. We don't know about people in Hawaii. You guys have a strange mix of things going on down there. But or if you're watching in another country, if you think you live in some form of freedom, you're crazy. And if you think that voting strictly, you know, red until you're dead or blue no matter who is going to help you, or that you somehow owe allegiance or loyalty to an endorsed candidate from a convention, you're beyond crazy. You are suffering cognitive dissonance. And if you were adamant that you were going to support one candidate, but your candidate didn't get the endorsement, that you now have to switch allegiance and vote for the candidate that did get endorsed because, gosh, we can't, especially Republicans, gosh, we can't let the Democrats win. All you need to do is take a look at Anthony's opponent in the primary this year, Pete Stauber, and understand that when you vote for the lesser of two evils, you're actually still voting for evil. You're just voting for retarded evil. And I'm using that in the musical sense of slowed down. So now that I've said all of that, I want to say my views may not necessarily reflect the views of my guest today. And I can almost guarantee you that through the conversation, for however long it goes, there are probably going to be places where there will be some pushback and we may not agree on everything. But at least the man is stepping up and taking on the uniparty, and he's doing it on his own without the support of the deep state and the insiders, especially in the regimist mindset in the Minnesota GOP, which, by the way, if things go the way I think they're going to go for the Minnesota GOP in the elections this fall, in the general, you're watching the death of the Minnesota GOP. It's on its last leg, and 2026 is probably going to be the final nail in its coffin. All right, Anthony, now that I sufficiently ruined your career.
That's okay. It wasn't much of a career to start off with. So, hey, thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks for saying yes after you thoroughly vetted me.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, good.
Just so everybody knows, Anthony's outside because they have no electricity inside, so he can't use his laptop, and they had a major storm roll through their area last night, and they're fortunate that the only thing they lost was power. And so it's caused them some issues. So if he looks a little blurry or you can't hear him quite well at times, it's, he lives in the middle of nowhere, by the way.
Yep.
They still bring the internet in on Wells Fargo wagons. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, no,
tell us
I
a
really
little bit about
appreciate it,
yourself.
Sure. So I live outside of Moore, Minnesota here. I'm a farmer. I didn't do that my whole life by any means. I started out doing residential maintenance, and I did that for a good portion of my life. And then I ended up losing a good portion of my vision to a degenerative eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. So I had to give up my driver's license, and my field of vision narrowed from way out here. Now I'm right into here, So it creates some struggles for me, but I persevere, and here I am.
And by the way, folks, he's not dressed in coveralls just for a gimmick. This is his life. So
yeah, this is my life. But we lost a number of trees last night, so as soon as this gets done, I get to go get firewood. So I'm dressed to work.
Like I said, it's his life. I dare you, if you win the primary and you go into the general and you win, I dare you to dress like this in Congress.
Yeah. I was thinking about that. Would I show up in flannels every day and my white t-shirts and overalls? Pull a John Fetterman kind of thing. Just wear what I normally wear.
Sweatpants.
Yeah.
Joggers. So you're a farmer and a homesteader. So how big of a spread do you run?
It's pretty big. So we've got 80 acres here in total. and we do it all. You know, I farm. We have a big garden here, multiple gardens. We do a lot of our own fruits and vegetables. You know, everything from we have patches of wild asparagus that we go pick. We grow tons of tomatoes. We love tomatoes. You know, carrots and beans and everything. We've got a huge raspberry patch, multiple plum trees and choke cherry trees and apple trees. And every fall we get pretty busy because we do our own canning and stuff like that. My wife is pretty big on that stuff for me, which I appreciate because she makes killer food. So
How many
yeah.
chickens do you have?
Well, we've got 20 chickens right now. 20
Mm.
chickens. So those are our layer chickens. We do meat birds as well though. When we do that, it's usually about 30 birds, and that's enough to get us through, you know, a year, and we can afford to give a couple away at that point. That just
Yeah,
feeds our family.
I have I have chickens in town. They're unlawful
Yeah.
chickens. So
Yeah.
they're law breaking chickens. We didn't get the little permission slip from the city to say I could have chickens. So
Yeah.
I always ask true farmsteaders and homesteaders, you gotta have chickens. If you don't
Yeah.
have
You have to
chickens,
have,
you've got yeah.
yeah. Yeah. We have more eggs than we can deal with right now, which is good because, you know, we get to do a lot of stuff with them, but it's pretty cool. We ended up turning in when we bought the property here, there was a Butler grain bin on the property, and I ended up turning that into the chicken coop. So it's good and
They have
secure.
an entire
It's all about,
Butler grain bin for
yeah, yep, yeah. It's pretty sweet. I built roosting boxes up in it, and I put perches all the way around on the inside so that they can perch up on there. And I cut out windows, and it's got the nice door that I can get into real easy. And then they've got a coop door on the back that opens up for them into a run. But they free range most of the time. I don't like letting them out real early in the morning because foxes and coyotes are still running out pretty hard. Then, you know, you lose quite a few. So I gotta go let them
well.
out and put them back in every night.
Oh yeah, trust me. The wife's like, it's bedtime. It's time to go to bed. You got to work in the morning. I'm like, I can't. The chickens won't go in.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
and it's tough now. You know, it stays light so long that you know, I'm ready for bed before they are. So
yeah,
that gets to
there
be
are
a chore.
you know, if you could tap into my security cams outside, you could see me running around half undressed chasing chickens with a pole trying to herd them like sheep, you know. Which actually I've got it down to an art now, but I look funny cuz I might be carrying a bottle of Corona Premium and a stick in one hand yelling at the chickens looking like the crazy guy in the neighborhood, you know, which to
Yeah,
be fair, I am the crazy guy in the neighborhood. So,
that's all
but
right. Got to have one
so
somewhere, you know.
yeah, so you kind of came out of nowhere
Mhm.
and decided you were going to run for a U.S. House of Representatives seat in Congressional District 8 up there in your neck of the woods,
Yep.
and you knew it would be an uphill fight. You
Oh
knew
yeah.
you weren't going to run as a Democrat,
Hmm.
and you also knew that somebody had to do something to unseat Pete Stauber. Please,
Yep.
Lord, unseat Pete Stauber, um,
Yeah.
because he's been around for how many cycles has he made it through now?
So it's 4 terms now, so he'll be in for 8 years.
Yeah,
You know, that's quite a long
that
time for somebody that doesn't accomplish very much.
well, yeah. To that end, what has he not accomplished?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I could probably list the things that he has accomplished a lot quicker. Uh, you know,
We'll start there
we're
then.
still struggling. Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, he took credit for an infrastructure bill that he voted against, so he got that done. You know, he
So what he's saying is that because he opposed it, people
Mhm.
voted for it because they figured if he was against it, it must be the right thing to do. I
Yeah, I don't really understand it. You know, I mean, I get it. He was just trying to vote with the party line, is what it was. You know, it was an infrastructure bill, and Was there waste in it? I'm sure. I'm sure there was waste in it. We have waste in everything that we pass right now. But that doesn't take away from the good that it did to the communities here in CD8. Especially the Duluth port, which got a ton of money from it. Um, you know, I'm not I'm not advocating that you should always just vote against your party line. You need to do your homework on these things, and you need to be clear and concise on why you are opposing something, or why you're for it. You can't just say, well, it's a bad thing to have, or I just don't want to vote for it, or like him, you just go silent and you vote against it and then hold a press conference taking credit for it. You know.
Which has been kind of like for me to be, I'm pretty politically astute. I know quite a bit about what's going on across the state and obviously across the country. But Stauber's been on my radar for a very long time because I constantly hear from, in that euphemistic rocks and cows mentality, the greater Minnesota supposed conservatives, have been talking about how bad he is, but yet his district keeps pumping him in, if he makes it this time, his 8th year. So
Yeah, he'll have been in
how
for
does
10
somebody
years.
this bad that nobody likes, how does he keep getting in? And is it just he's politically connected or what is it?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a number of different things that are causing it. He typically runs just pretty much unopposed. Uh, you know, the parties are real good at picking who they want, supporting who they want, and just pushing out everybody else.
Yep.
I think if you followed the GOP convention, you probably saw a lot of that. It's a number of different people. You know, uh, and not to say that I'm for every one of those people that got pushed out by any means, but that's not a way to run a party. Especially if you're supposed to be the great party. You know what I mean? It seems a little bit asinine to have to handle business in that fashion. So he's backed by tons of money. He is really good at taking donations from PACs and organizations. A lot of his money doesn't even come from CD8 constituents. It comes from Washington or big PAC money. Whether that's local here or not, it's not the constituents that are supporting him. It's organizations and PACs, and
Is it
that's a
the
huge
fact that
problem.
does it just come down to it in general elections in your congressional district then, way up there in northern Minnesota? Is it just he's got an R behind his name and people think, well, we're a Republican, basically a Republican stronghold, so therefore we got to vote for whoever has the R, and he just happens to be the one now? Or
Yep.
or is he like outside of politics, out on the street? Is he just a genuinely affable guy that people like? I mean, because there again, every time I talk to somebody in the area, nobody likes him, but yet everybody votes for him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got the R behind his name. Depending on what you're looking at here, there's like the Cook PVIs and stuff like that. CD8 runs Republican pretty hard. Not as hard as some of the other districts in other fashions, but I think it was like a +8 or something here. So that's a big swing to try and overcome. And when you look at, there's 750,000 people in the district, or in most districts here in Minnesota. Uh, the voting percentage of those is pretty small. You don't usually have a big turnout, especially in primaries. That's much smaller in a primary. I think you're talking probably 20,000 votes for him. That's all it really takes, and he wins the primary. So he's got the backing of the political establishment. He's got the backing of PACs and organizations that want him to stay in that position. And it makes sense because when you look at his voting record, he votes in favor of all of those every single time. every single time, which was a huge
Is he?
promise that he broke when he started to run anyways. He's he promised that he was going to be different, that he wasn't going to just vote the party line, that he was going to be, a responsible caretaker of CD8 and our well-being. And it just never happened that way.
Thank you, Skipper, for my co-host from Veteran Nation, Skipper's channel. Thanks for the super chat, by the way. Since Anthony doesn't take money from PAX, he gets none of my super chat. So Anthony has no idea what a super chat is either.
Nope. Nope.
It's when the people who
No.
are watching like what you're doing and they give you money. And
Oh,
so
well, hey, you can do that. I got a website that's got a link on it.
Dude, yeah, I think he knows how to. I think we put it in the description where you can find him if you want to support his work. So you kind of limited yourself in the respect of you're refusing to take money from any PACs or any organized groups, knowing full well that that's going to be problematic if you will allow the term trying to campaign against somebody who does take that. But you were very clear in our initial conversation that you don't want to be associated or affiliated with any PACs.
Yep.
I think I'm covering a couple of people who said they weren't going to take any money from PACs, and now we've discovered in one case that they are. So that's something that I'll be watching. If you do happen to win the primary, I will watch to see. Well, I'll have my Natalie, by the way, my volunteer researcher who does a phenomenal job. She helps me stay abreast of all these things, but so we'll watch for that. Not that I expect that you're lying, but these are the things that I hold people to when they say they won't take money from PACs. But do you see it as, is that resonating with people? Because, let's be frank, right now there are a couple of PACs, APAC in particular here in the United States, has turned on a lot of people, but it's also turned a lot of people off. They're able to throw their weight around, and we know who they're doing it for, but they're able to throw their weight around. But we're also seeing that in places where they kind of had a strong foothold with candidates, they've lost a lot of ground. The voting public, even Republicans, have turned on them. So do you think your position has strengthened your ability to challenge Pete in this election, or are you getting feedback one way or another?
Yeah, I get feedback when I talk to people about it. They're grateful that that's the stance I take, and I know it comes with challenges, believe me, because I say that I don't take PAC money, and PACs still reach out to me. They still want to send me questionnaires. They still want to try and endorse me, and I don't want anything to have to do with that. I'm disgusted with the amount of money that gets put into politics in general, and PAC money is such a huge part of that. It the billions of dollars that get spent on it it's gross to me. We should be electing people and re-electing them based on their performance, not on how well they can buddy up to their donors. Not how well they can vote in their donors' favor, but what they do for their constituents. That is what it should be. It is an uphill battle. I do know that it is tough, but I've got a little bit of time on my hands. I make time for it, and I feel like I make up for it the best I can, just by getting out and talking to people. That's what really matters. I don't like to keep talking about the guy, but Pete Stauber is really good at photo ops. He's got a number of friends around CD8 that he goes and visits, and then you pretend like it's a big event, but really you're just visiting your friend, and you get a photo op. You say, "What a great conversation we had with constituents today." Well, they might be constituents, but they're your friends. They're not the voting public that you need to earn the respect of. And I would like to see PAC money gone from politics altogether, and I know that'll probably upset a lot of people, but too bad. You know,
You
I don't
could
like
you
that at
you could
all.
form an anti-PAC pack.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so. I'll pass on that one, but
Oh, all right. So
you know, that brings up a funny thing though, because you see a lot of people running around now talking about how they're grassroots and how, oh, this is a grassroots campaign and this is what grassroots looks like. And then you see all the PAC money that they take, and typically they're starting their own PACs. And you know, whether it's just victory PACs or fundraising PACs or whatever they are, they're still PACs. It's still the same thing. You know,
yeah,
you're
oh,
able to lump that
100%.
money
Yeah.
together and use it in fashions where normal people donating to your campaign, you know, $5 at a time, it can't compete with that, because that money comes from places that it's so hard to track. You
Well,
know,
in a case of one, and I'm not the name's not important, but in the case of one individual who we're working on uncovering some stuff on, where I'm not taking any money from PACs and immediately forms a PAC, then
yeah,
when all of his large money, like ultra wealthy friends and family members
yeah,
reach the cap of what they can give, it rolls over into his campaign PAC, his victory PAC, and then the victory PAC turns around and takes that overflow money and funnels it right back into his campaign. And I'm like, it's so sleazy. It's just so, and it says so much about a candidate that would do that for themselves. And people can say what they want. Well, gosh, you got to win. And I'm like, really, is that what matters? Is like at this point just winning? Whatever you got to do to win. That's called
yeah,
cheating, folks. That's
yeah,
that's really
yeah,
literally what it's called. It's called cheating. So
yeah,
the pack thing was really interesting to me because it's you led with that question. You know, like I don't ask a lot of questions of the people I, reach out to and invite them on. I figure if they're going to hang themselves, they'll bring their own rope. I don't,
yeah,
I'll ask a question and they'll answer and it'll give me, I might form the loop that gets it started, but you're normally providing your own rope. And so you beat me to the punch in bringing up the packs and the strange, any fringe groups, which I don't know if you remember, I kind of paused and chuckled a little bit because I constantly am getting called fringe and whatnot, or
yeah.
radical, because I'm not the two-party, uniparty, you know, mouthpiece that a lot of people want me to be. Um, you have received a lot of pushback from the establishment, from, what I refer
Oh,
to as the Minnesota GOP deep state. They've had a
yeah.
lot of they made a lot of accusations against you. Give the audience a little bit of some insight of some of the things that have been said and the reasoning that they've used for
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
some of the things they've labeled you.
yeah, I guess I don't see everything that they say. So if you know something that I don't bring up,
Well,
please
you
feel
you had
free,
brought
you
up in
know.
our phone call the other day. You had brought up that they've accused you of being a leftist
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm opposing Pete Stauber, so that makes sense. Why would somebody from the right oppose somebody from the right? You know, so I get
and
that.
you're implied that you're basically just a Democrat operative.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, which is super funny because, you know, if you looked at my voting record for the last 25 years, you know, that would piss a lot of Democrats off. So it's not
You feel
it
you feel a
yeah.
little bit like you're going in front of the have you are you now or have you ever been affiliated with the Communist Party of the
Yeah.
United States?
Right. Yeah, no,
I
no,
mean, McCarthy
nothing
wasn't
quite like
totally
that, but
wrong, but I mean,
yeah.
McCarthy wasn't totally wrong. He was on the right track. He may have been a little off track
Yeah.
on how he's handling things, but that's really what it feels like in these situations.
Yeah.
The minute you don't toe the party line, especially for the GOP, and this is what I don't understand, the GOP loves to label everybody on the left snowflakes
Mhm.
and you're all Marxist and you use all these terrible tactics. But the one thing you rarely see from the Democrats is disloyalty.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that. That I don't know if it's there people are afraid to be disloyal to the party, the
Yeah.
Democrats, but the Republicans are some of the most snowflakery engaging individuals who if you don't toe the line of what they want, they're the name calling and the ad hominems and the straw man fallacies. Just I don't know if it's representative of a low IQ or a low information situation, but they always their retorts are always aimed at personal attacks and not about your positions ever. They can't dismantle the position, so they have to go after you on a personal level. And it's
Right.
they're
Yeah.
far more like their opponents on the left than they think they are.
Yeah. I've never been attacked for anything that I stand on. You know, I, I'm not running on typical Republican issues. You know, I'm not out here screaming about all of the things that you typically see online. You know, I see a broken government. That's what I see. It's not even, I say broken, you know, I used to describe our government as like this big oak tree and it had three big branches and one was, you know, kind of weak and falling down. You could tell it was like disease ridden. And the more I dig into it, I'm realizing that it's not broken. You know, it is corrupt
It's
and it was
working the way
designed
it's
that way.
designed to. Yeah.
Yeah, it was designed that way. And so you know that bothers me. To touch back on this other part, you know, I I get I get a lot of respect from people on the right who are just normal everyday voters. I typically find that the people who push back the hardest are actually in, you know, the system. They're delegates or they are in BPOUs, you know, they're in seats that, you know, those are the people who push back the hardest. And it's I get it. Like, you know, they pay money to be in those positions. Every year they pay money for their guy to win. So when a guy who's just fed up with the system and wants to see change steps up and pushes back, you know, they're going to feel, you know, offended or attacked in a fashion. And I understand it. I don't really hold it against them. You know, my biggest response to it really is just, well, who are you going to vote for in November then? You know, when I win, who are you going to vote for? Are you going to vote for me because I got an R behind my name, or are you going to switch parties? Are you just not going to vote? You know, you're in the GOP, you know, BPOU or whatever you're in. You're gonna give it up altogether now. So that's my biggest pushback on them. And
Well,
you
I
know,
I think you ask a valid question, but I think at the same time you already know the answer, and it's probably encouraging, but also discouraging at the same time that they'll vote for you because you have an R behind your name.
yeah,
They won't really
yeah,
care about your policies. They won't really care
yeah,
about your positions. They'll just go, well, it's the Republican, and we don't want the Democrat to win. And
yeah.
fair, we don't want the Democrat to win, but we don't, should we always want the Republican to win? It
Right. Yeah.
How's
Yeah. You
that
know,
working out
if
for you, Minnesota?
yeah, you know, it when you step back and look at it, you know, we chose government as a society as the lesser of two evils. You know, and every time you push a candidate, you're doing the same thing. What are you pushing the lesser of two evils? You know, because that candidate is going to impose laws on you that you may not like, that you may not agree with, you know. And so it's kind of ironic, and it's kind of a, you know, it pulls at your heartstrings a little bit, because at a certain point you just want to say, well, you know, I don't even want to deal with it. You know what I mean? And I think that's where maybe a lot of people get to when it comes time to vote, is they don't want to have to even deal with politics. You know, that's why we have such low voter turnout in the first place. You know,
Do you think
not
it's
like
by design,
everybody.
though? Do you think
Yeah.
not the government itself, but within politics? Um, I should have warned you this is how the show goes. So, but but within politics, because I think this says more about you as a candidate and as a person, where in your character to be able to have these this type of conversation versus here's the position and why I'm different than my opponent,
Yeah.
which is fair, but the audience tends to want to know more about you. And so when you talk about candidates being pushed and whatnot, and like I said, voting for the lesser of two evils, or
Mhm.
and evil being the lesser of two evils, just being slower than the other evil. I don't think it's a government. I don't think the intent of government within politics was that you're just always limited. I think that politics has become the uniparty politique
Mhm.
has by design has done its best to drive as many people out of being interested in politics as possible because it's the only way they stay in control of the
Yeah.
political machine to feed the deep state at whatever level it's at.
Yeah.
And so the more people they can disenfranchise, the more people that they can lull into boredom or just being so frustrated that they don't even bother paying attention anymore, the
Yeah.
better off they are. And I think that is intentional, and I think one of the places where we're starting to see people wake up to that intentionality are within, like, local, um, political frameworks and governmental frameworks. You're starting to see far more people show up to city council meetings, school board meetings, and county commission meetings. In particular, city councils and county commission meetings as it relates to things like the data centers. Now,
Yeah.
they're opposing the data centers for I'm glad they're opposing the data centers. I wish they were opposing the data centers for the right reasons, but at least they're out opposing the data centers because they don't want it in their backyard. They don't want the natural resource waste, the electrical expenditures, the stress on the grid. They think that AI is the problem when it's not. The real problem with data centers, as everybody knows, is the surveillance state that they enable
Yeah.
and why they're pushing the data centers so much. But you're starting to see more people get involved and realize now that by design they have been pushed out of being disinterested and are now terrified by what they're seeing because their eyes have been opened to the fact that their disinterest has led to the problems that they're having now. Do you
Get shaky.
would you say that that's been a problem, like, in your area, or was it kind of where you were at before you decided to get involved?
Okay. So we touched on a few things here. So the
I'm
disconnect from
notorious for that,
politics,
so
yeah, the disconnect on politics in general, I think is it's designed that way. It absolutely is. You can't run an effective campaign from Washington when everybody has their eyes on you. If everybody follows exactly what you're doing, if they're following the money you're taking in, if they're following every vote you vote on, if they follow your attendance record, you would see massive turnout for people to be ousted. So I do believe it is absolutely designed that way to keep people with just limited view and limited instruction from the party as to what to do. Um, so more on like the data centers and your
and I was
local
just
town
using
halls.
that as an example, by the way. I'm not
Yeah,
looking for a
yeah,
position piece
yeah.
on it right now, but
Right. Yeah. No, I'll give you one. I am not for the data centers that are going in. I don't have a problem with my data right now. Do you? I mean, we're able to stream here right now on what we've got. I don't see the issue with that. They're
I
putting up
just
data
wanna
centers. They're
I just
trying
wanna know
to
how many Wells
everywhere.
Fargo wagons are hauling this message out for you right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Um, they're trying to put in data centers all over the United States, and for what? Is it to power a super AI? You know what I mean? Is that what the explanation is it for mass surveillance, because that's what it's turning out to be?
Well, that's
Is it
exactly what
is
it is.
yeah, is it for you know I see this in a number of different ways, and I try not to get too deep into one path or the other because I got to keep my focus kind of straight right now. But there's a lot going on with those data centers, and when you're talking about putting up thousands of them across the United States, because that's what they're looking at doing, is thousands of them across the United States. Um, what is the real purpose behind that? Do you really need that much data to surveil people in the United States? I don't think so. I think they probably do more than a fair job right now, peeking in through what they have to see what we're doing.
Even
I
even
do
now,
think that some of it,
we've just been put on a list. So
yeah, yeah, that's fine. Look, I'm on a couple, I guess. I don't know. um,
if you weren't before
there's
you came on the show, you are now. I guarantee you.
um, I see it also. There's other things going on with the data centers. There's a big push for cryptocurrency right now. And I remember when cryptocurrencies were a thing and people were trying to build little centers in their basements and stuff and mine cryptocurrency. Well, I mean, a data center seems like the perfect opportunity for that. And I don't want to go too far down that hole because I don't really know that much about it, but I've looked into it a little, and I'm sure
It's
that's got to be one of the reasons, is to be able to mine, cryptocurrency.
Well, I think it's worse. I think it's worse than cryptocurrency. It's actually more about a stronger control for central bank digital currency, which is going to be
Yeah.
the Federal Reserve's way of undermining cryptocurrency and being
Yeah.
able to lock down people's accounts. So I think it's a really, especially when you're running for the House of Representatives, it's a topic that you really need to be aware of because that's right in the wheelhouse of the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
Is, you know, how are we um, how are we going to protect the people from being destroyed for having bad opinions? And that's you look at what they did in Canada during the truck the truckers drive,
Yep.
their big marathon
Yeah.
boycott up there, and how even
Yeah.
without central
Debanking
banks,
everybody.
yeah, they debanked everybody. And
Yep.
data centers, we had somebody comment the data centers are for AI, not more bandwidth on your phone. Um, I would even argue that they're not for AI in the way that people think. It's not so more people can create images and, have, pretend that they're musicians by having AI write songs for them.
Yeah.
Um, it's literally for an aspect of AI, which is about things like surveillance and
Yeah.
central bank digital currency and monitoring people and being able to debank people in a flash as soon as somebody utters an opinion. It's to power all the flock cameras and other things that Palantir wants to do. And I think that's something that someone who's running for House has really got to. People in the House right now, they're
Yeah.
whatever they want for data centers, they're all voting for it because they've been
Yeah.
told. Trump even said, "No, I'm pushing for data centers," and so Republicans especially are like, "Oh yeah, data centers." But what we're seeing in people like at your level, Duluth just had this happen. I think it was Superior. Um, that your district just had a big outrage fest of
Mhm.
Republicans and Democrats, left and right, got together to oppose the center that they were trying to build there. And we're seeing it down here in my neck of
Yeah.
the woods in Pine Island. It's bringing the left and the right together against
Yeah.
the establishment. And that's terrifying to them, which is why they're pushing for the
Yeah.
data centers even more.
Yeah. Well,
And
it makes sense. Nobody wants to be spied on, you know. So everybody should be opposed to the data centers. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. It's do you like your freedoms? It's as simple as that. And when you think about the surveillance that they're trying to do now, or continue to push and push further into, it's that shouldn't be, well, I'm a Democrat and I don't care, or I'm a Republican and I just want to do this. Everybody should be opposed to that.
absolutely.
Nonpartisan should be opposed to it altogether. Nobody wants to be spied on. So
Well,
we should absolutely oppose
you would
those.
you would you would think that, but yet we still have people supporting FISA, and which again is
Yeah,
another House issue.
yeah,
FISA, FISA courts, and re-upping the Patriot Act. Every time it comes up, we
yeah,
spy on me harder, Daddy. Um,
yep,
that's that's very much a mentality, and it's going to take outsiders like you to, as I, put in here, unseating the status quo. It,
yeah,
it's going to take a lot more outsiders willing to go in and shake it up to unseat that status quo, because nobody, the Democrats and the Republicans that are elected at the federal level especially, just aren't watching out for us outside of a small handful of people like the Masseys, and look what they did to
yep,
him, and what
yep,
they're trying to do to Rand Paul even. And
yep,
so I think that's an appealing aspect of what you offer.
yeah, yeah.
You've
And
been Go ahead.
I want to I want to get involved with stuff like that. I really do. I've set some goals for myself here, and I've got these timelines that I need to adhere to. So I have to focus on August 11th. August 11th is my push. So I have to push for beating Pete Stoppard. So that is my main focus there. When that's done, then I'm waiting for November, and I have a whole timeline of things that I need to do between August and November to try and I don't know, get in, I guess, you know what I mean, to win the election. And then I have just a rough outline of what I need to do between November and January, of what I have to accomplish, and what I need to be prepared for before I get into the House come January. So I try to keep my focus narrow, like my vision, you know what I mean? I try to keep it narrow and straightforward, and I don't want to lose sight of what I'm really working towards. Now, believe me, I could talk all day on all sorts of on issues and stuff like that, and we can today. It's fine. Uh, but
Well, you do have trees to cut up, so I won't.
yeah, well, they'll be there tomorrow too, I'm sure. I you know, I want to go to the House, and I want to make change there, but it's not going to be, I want to go and I want to vote on infrastructure bills, or I want to go and I want to pass this law or that law, that will affect us on our daily lives. You know what I mean?
Right.
I wouldn't mind doing that, but my focus when I get there, it really has to be just rooting out the corruption in government. That's all I'll be able to focus on, because I'm not going to stay there long. I've got no intention of running for a second term. I don't want to be gone from my family that long, even if it is only 138 days a year. That's too long for me to be away from my family. It's too long for me to be away from my farm.
Well,
And
let's see how your family feels after you've been gone for that long for the first time. They might say, "No, run
yeah,
again."
yeah, right. It was quiet around here.
I
So
wanna focus in on what you just said
yeah,
about the corruption, because that was one of the things in our conversation that really stood out to me, was just the pure corruption that you experienced just in trying to talk to members of the congressional body.
yeah,
Just over and over and over again, you reached out to so many people, and they were like, "We don't
yeah,
have time for you." And in one case, you were told, "This elected position is never going to take a call from a constituent."
yeah, yeah,
That just
yeah. So it was
absolutely disgusting.
yeah. Yeah, it was, it felt really weird hearing that. And it was a staffer that said it, so it wasn't out of her mouth. Uh, it was a staffer that told me that, but it still felt really weird hearing. I felt it every single day. You know what I mean? I
There's a
used to call.
difference between feeling it and experiencing it in the lack of response. It's another thing altogether to have it actually stated to you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And that, you know what I mean? So I had been reaching out to our representatives for quite a while. Not all the time, you know what I mean? Whether it was, when Pete got in, whether it was once a year, or further on here in his career, multiple times a year, or, from last year into this year where I started calling and emailing, monthly, then it went to weekly, and then it went to daily. And I was calling and emailing, I would call not just his offices here in Minnesota, but also in DC. So I would check the schedule and I would see when he was supposed to be in DC, and I'd talk to his staffers in DC, or, leave messages or whatever. And I started to reach out to everybody in Minnesota on that level. And I never heard back from anybody that's an incumbent, not a single one. I never heard back from, oh, my cat. I never heard back from Brad Finstead's office. I never heard back from Tom Emmer's
Which,
office. I never heard,
being in Brad Finstead's district, I'll tell you, is the number one complaint of his constituents in first district is that he is not available to his constituents.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a pattern. It's not just his, it's everywhere.
It's almost like it's a playbook they hand them when they get elected.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll call this one out for you so that we can be real clear on it. It was Betty McCollum's office who told me that when I had called to reach out to her, because I had pulled up this petition. I'd spent a lot of time thinking about what was wrong with our government, why things were the way they were. And these weren't new ideas that I came up with. They're all old ideas. It's term limits. It's get the money out of politics. It's hold our congressional people accountable. Make them work for the constituents and not their donors. And so I was trying to push a petition to them. So that's why I was reaching out to all of them all the time. And I never heard back from any of them. I talked to staffers every single day. It was the same thing. Oh, can I just take a message? You can send an email. We'll see if they get it. But it was Betty McCollum's office where I had been calling for a number of days, and they just came out and flat out told me, they're like, listen, there's no way that she's going to call you back. She doesn't call her constituents back. And I was floored by it. You know what I mean? It just, I get it. I felt it all the time, but yeah, to hear somebody say that to you, it's upsetting. And,
did it put was it kind of the ganache on the cake of corruption for you? You're like, well, there it is, right there on the, right there on the surface now. It's just fully exposed. We now know that these politicians, Republicans and Democrats, they're just all corrupt. They're just not in there again. It's not all, but it gets to feeling that way after a while.
Yeah. If you compare it against what I'm running on, if you compare that to that, then they're all corrupt. They all do something that pushes them one way or the other, in my opinion, that makes it corrupt. Hold on a second. Kitty cat, get out of here.
Oh, the audience will love the cat. That's fine. Just
it's a paid actor, by the way. So, if you go over all the things I'm running on, right? So stock trading, we had the Stock Trading Act put in, and the stock just stands for Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge. That's all it is. But it's a pay to play. It's $200 fine when you get caught. And like 1 in 7 congressmen get caught doing it. And they just pay the $200 fine. They're checking their portfolios before they're walking into their committee meetings. It's a gross thing to have to pay $200 to be able to trade on millions of dollars. You would pay
if you get caught.
If you get caught, right. And what is get caught? Well, did you disclose it in the proper amount of time? That's usually what it comes down to is like minute things. The law is already there. Nobody's been to prison from Congress for trading stocks, and they outperform the market by astounding numbers.
Oh, yeah.
How do you do that? How do you do that if you're not doing it on insider information? You're not. You have to be using insider information.
You couldn't possibly be implying that anybody who's ever been elected would ever manipulate the stock market at all.
Yeah.
Like announcing that there's going to be a peace deal over the weekend and then do more bombing.
Right.
I mean,
that
never happens.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So how hard is it?
I'm a cheeky bastard. I'm sorry.
How hard is it for us to ask of our representatives to just not trade stocks? Just don't do it. You can have stocks, you just can't trade them. You have to just put them in a blind investment or something. You're just not in control of them. Your immediate family should not be in control of stocks as a whole. Is that a
If
hard
you
thing to
sit,
ask
yeah,
for?
if you sit in any elected position, especially at the federal level, you should not be. You
Yeah,
and your immediate family should not be playing the stock market, and you
yeah.
darn sure
But,
shouldn't be walking out a multi-billionaire or millionaire after
yeah,
being in office for 2 terms even,
right, right.
especially
And every
considering that, like, you guys, they at the house, they get like $160,000 a year, and you got people that are walking away 2 terms down the road or 1 term down the road, and
No,
they're working
it's
millions.
$174,000 a year, and that's just salary. That's
That's
not your
yeah,
$80 a day per diem. That's not your health benefits. That's not your retirement if you served over a few terms.
yeah.
That's it's public service. Public service isn't a place to get rich. It's something that you
The he
should
what?
do in public service
No,
and then go home.
but we sacrifice so much.
Oh yeah,
We
yeah,
s
yeah.
we
So
we
much.
give up our jobs to go serve you people. How are we gonna
Yeah.
pay our bills if we're not making more than you?
Yeah, well, they give up their jobs, they trade stocks, and then when they do decide to leave, when some of them decide to leave, they enter the lobby market. That's another aspect is the lobbying part of it.
You're so
So many
cynical.
of these people, yeah, I know. So many of these people leave Congress and just go work for lobbying groups. And right now there's a 2-year waiting period before you can actually work for a lobby group. Not before you can actually lobby in Washington with the lobby group. So these people leave Congress and then they just sit on a retainer for 2 years and work for a lobbying group. They walk right back into the same halls that they were just seated in. They talk to the same people that they've been talking to for decades, and they get to push on bills that they voted on, and that part of it is gross. We shouldn't allow that kind of stuff to happen. We should have a bigger cool down period between that. I would like to say just get rid of lobbying altogether, but that's protected speech. Anytime you go to Washington and talk about any kind of a large issue, that's lobbying. And you can't do it. I'm not about taking away our First Amendment right, but there's absolutely no reason that there's the money in it the way it is. So, it shouldn't be a
Well, they
2-year
wouldn't give a damn
period.
about their First Amendment right if there wasn't money attached to them being able to exercise it, you know? I
Yeah,
mean, it's reality.
yeah. I don't, maybe kind of, I could see it. I give this example a lot. You're like, hey, bicycle helmet safety is a big issue, and I want to go talk to my congressman in Washington, and I want to talk to a few of them. And I just want to see if they'll enforce a law that says, children under the age of 12 have to wear a helmet if they're riding on the street or something. You know what I mean? That's just, I mean, it's hypothetical, but right there, you're a lobbyist. So if you go into the halls and you start talking to those people, you're a lobbyist. That's what you're doing. You're not registered as a lobbyist, but you're lobbying. And it's the registered lobbyists that become a problem. So we should have a bigger cool down period. Are these lobbying groups going to hire congressmen if they got to pay them a retainer for 5 years? I don't think so. So that's where I'm at with that. I think we should extend just basic lobbying out to 5 years. And that should go for a multitude of different facets with it. I think if you're gonna lobby for like a foreign company, it should be 10 years. You should have huge cool down periods where laws can make real change before you voted on it and now you're going to go lobby on it. Or in Tom Emmer's case, you lobbied on it and now you're going to go work on it. He did the old switcheroo on the other side there. So
Yep.
yeah,
You're
but it's
hitting
not.
you're hitting all the buttons, because these are names that some people know. Some people know Pete.
Yeah,
A lot of
and
people
and
know Tom, and
I'm only bringing up these people because they're local to me. This is happening everywhere across the country.
it's
It's not
yes, it's
just here.
happening. Yeah, it happens in
Yeah,
every congressional district across the United States. And
yeah,
the ones who don't play ball find themselves on the outside. And the more you don't play ball with the most powerful lobbies, the more likely you are to lose everything you have. And
yeah,
and and that's what's the telling thing is Thomas Massey exposing that his very first day in office was an APAC guy walked in and said, basically introduced himself as, I'm your APAC guy.
Yeah.
And I'll be meeting with you on I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
I'll be meeting with you on a regular basis. And Massey says, no, we won't. We will not be meeting. I kicked him out of his office.
Yeah.
And the scary thing is that's not normative. That's not the normative response to any lobbyist. And
Mhm.
what bothers me is you're talking about making these calls to all of the congressional districts and the representatives in those districts across just the state of Minnesota, and not one of them returned an email. Not one of them
Yeah.
returned a phone call.
Right.
But they're making time for the
Yeah.
high-end bigwig registered lobbying groups.
Yeah.
And
that's
what's that even maybe more so than PACs. That's what's so frightening, is how quickly these people forget who they're supposed to be representing.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's a horrible feeling, to have that be the realization, you know what I mean? That that they're not working for you. They're just working for the highest donor. That's it. That's all it is. It's they whoever gave them the biggest check last week is who they're buddying up with. And we should have a lot stricter rules about lobbying, as a whole. Not just the cool down periods and stuff like that, but we should have better oversight as to what they talk about. Right now that doesn't happen. They get to just put a brief little thing in there that I talked to so and so on such a date, and then that's the record. And that's not good enough. There should be a detailed conversation that gets put in, and it shouldn't just be one submission. You should have to separate, and the lobbyist submits one, and then the congressman submits one. And if there's any issue with those two things, if they don't match up, there should be an investigation on it. And that would be like the safeguard to it, I think. But we need to police them way better. They're really good at policing us on everything that we do. Martha Stewart goes to prison for trading on insider information, but they pay a $200 fine. There's no oversight onto what they talk about with the lobbyists, but we already know that they're taking the lobbyists' money, in
For
whatever
sure.
fashion. I can't go ahead and say that they're pocketing checks, because that would not be great for my campaign, and I don't fully believe that is actually even what's happening. They run it
Of
in
your
different fashions. You know what I mean? They really do.
they, yeah,
It's not
they
just like it's not just, here, I wrote you a check for $200,000. Now put it in your campaign.
right.
Jack Abramoff was a lobbyist a while back. There's a great documentary. It's short. It's 25 minutes long, I think, is the one I'm thinking of here. So he was a lobbyist who actually went to jail for breaking the laws. And he goes through and he describes exactly how it works, and he does a really good job of it. He tells you that, it's not just I hand you a check and you give me your vote, because that would be breaking the law. So what you do is you say, well, I know you, you know me, we talk to each other all the time. I hear you got an election coming up. I'd love to donate to that. I can give you $300,000, I think, is the example he gets, and I can pack a whole room full of donors for you, and we can fund your reelection campaign. And you don't have to say,
It's the
I'm getting the
laundering
vote.
process all over again.
Yeah, yeah, and it that's the fashion that it works in. And now, we could sidestep here real quick, and we could talk about this. So I believe it was McDonald versus the U.S. was the change for the definition of bribery. Okay, so bribery, the definition used to just say, if it looks like bribery, it is bribery, and that's the standard we get held to. If you own a business and it looks like you got bribed, well, you're going to court for it. But they changed it, and it says you implicitly, you have to have the verbiage saying, I am giving you money for this. Like you have to have both parts of those be worded just right in order for them to be charged with bribery now. And that's
100%.
ridiculous. You know, it should never
Yeah.
be that way. You know, if it looks like
The
bribery, it should be investigated as bribery.
as
And
bribery, yeah. There again,
yeah,
because if you or I did this to, with a public official at
yeah,
our at this very insular local level, it would immediately be investigated that way.
yeah,
It just
yep,
it absolutely 100%.
yeah,
The the reality for you is that you're kind of a it's probably a dated reference for you, but the feel of what you're talking about is a little bit of a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington kind
yeah,
of feel. I've
yeah,
interviewed somebody that I'm pretty sure was the Manchurian Candidate. And you're a
yeah,
little bit more of the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, except in your case, you're not the Mr. Smith that goes to Washington and what it gets awakened when he gets there and finds out how bad everything is like your Mr. Smith Goes to
yeah,
Washington because you already know how bad everything is and you want to go
yeah.
up there and you do want to rock the boat.
Oh
You
yeah,
you do want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, 100%. You know, I'm not going in there naive. You know, I'm not just gonna walk in and oh look at everything's great here. I know that it's all corrupt. And that's the point is that's what we need to stop. And I jump back to this all the time. You know, if it was just me, you know, if I didn't have a family, would I care quite so much? You know, probably not. You know, everybody gets screwed over all the time in life. It's not like it's you know, this is something new that's happening. But,
right.
you know, I've got kids to look after and just providing a good life for them with what I have isn't enough. You know, I need to make sure that when they grow up, they have a government that actually works for them and is not just there, you know, in spite of them or you know, to control them with you know their. I got to be careful here. um, you know, I just want a government that works right. How hard is that? You know what I mean? We
Well, we've been
250
struggling.
years ago, we started a war with another country for our freedom and our independence and for a government that worked for us. That was it.
And
You know, it
in
was
that 250 years, we've managed to give ourselves Great Britain all
yeah,
over again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're out celebrating yesterday on everything we're getting taxed on. You know what I mean? So yeah, it again, if it was just me, would I be running for Washington? You know, probably not. I'd just be calling and you know airing my grievances with everybody that I could. But you know, my I got a little girl and I'm just not gonna allow it to happen. You know, I won't do it. So I'm not going there naive. I know exactly what I'm walking into. I know that there's corruption throughout it on many facets. And I know it runs deeper than just the issues that I'm talking about. I really know it does. But you know, I think about it as like what is the core of what's happening here? How could we eliminate most of what's going on and put people in that would actually do the right things for us, you know? That's what we need. That's what we need to focus on. You know, if they didn't sit there in lifelong appointments, you know, collecting PAC money every year or collecting, you know, whatever, not from their constituents, you know, would they really be voting for us or you know, so that's another thing. Term limits, man. Term limits. Jeez. Why don't we have term limits?
Well,
We have
it's
term limits
the
for our president. They get 2 terms, you know, but
well,
Chuck Grassley can sit in the same seat for over 50 years,
it
you
took
know.
it took it took the country being burned
Yeah.
for them to realize that the president needed to have a limit to the amount of times he could be in office. The I think the not the problem with term limits, but a lot of people buy the argument that term limits just don't work because by the time you get up there and figure out what's going on, it's time for you to leave. Well, that's because the
Mm.
term limits have never been in place.
Yeah.
And and so they can go up there and they can drag their feet. They can
Yeah.
turn Congress, the House and the Senate, into a giant machine that is meant to grind as slowly as possible for people who want to come in and make a change, while they continue to grind out all of the burdensome regulations and attacks upon our natural rights as possible.
Yeah.
I had asked somebody, I think it was Tom Weiler, I had him on last week, and I had asked him his view on Trump proposing a nation, a law at the federal level for countrywide constitutional carry.
Mhm.
And the irony of that is the number of people who are celebrating a law that shouldn't even need to be a law, but because
Yeah.
of the way the country operates now,
Yeah.
it has to be a law.
Yeah.
So the very purpose
Yeah.
of the law is to enforce a constitutional position on carrying firearms with an unconstitutionally valid or an invalid law that enforces the Constitution.
Yeah.
And everybody's applauding. Man, that was a great idea, President Trump. Well, why haven't we stopped and asked ourselves, why has this become a problem in the first freaking place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
And
I say this quite a bit. Our Constitution isn't the set of rules for us. It's not. We didn't write those 250 years ago so that we knew that what we could and couldn't do. It was a set of rules for our government to operate by, to let them know what they could and couldn't do. And I do think it's funny.
we would have been
I
better
get
off
it.
with the Articles of Confederation, if you ask me. But I'm kind of a Lysander Spooner type. So
Yeah. It is, I do get some hilarity out of it that the First Amendment is a freedom of speech, which by all means gets censored anyways. You're not allowed to say whatever you want, and you can be punished for it now. In fact, they're pushing more and more for anti-speech against, like AIPAC and Israel, which seems bizarre to me.
Yeah,
But
it's not just them. Now there's opposing data centers and talking
Yeah.
negatively about AI.
Yeah.
It has a lot of people landing on watch lists. So
Yeah.
and that's not a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
All you have to Google will even tell you. They're proudly announcing it.
Yeah.
That speaking out against it.
Right. So I find some hilarity in it that is our First Amendment. And then we had to back it up right away with, well, we should probably have guns. You can say whatever you want.
I don't know if there's
but,
a rhyme or I don't know if there's a rhyme or
carry a gun.
reason to. Yeah, I don't know if there's a rhyme or reason to how
No.
how they decided, because the third is not how quartering troops, which
Yeah.
I would argue with the infringements on the first and second that we've experienced in the history of this empire. Quartering troops may be coming at this point. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And how far can you dig into that? You know what I mean? If surveillance lives in your home all the time, is that not the same as quartering? I don't know. I'm not going to go down that one too far, but
right.
So yeah, term limits would be huge. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, as long as people there again understand that the reason why they think term limits won't work is because Congress, the House and the Senate don't want them to work.
Yeah.
That's the only reason they won't work, is that they don't want them to work.
Yeah.
When you look, and I want you to be able to wrap this up, because I do know I want to be respectful of your time and your family, but
Yeah.
When you look at your goals, and assuming that you win the primary and assuming that you win the general, have you even done any digging into what it's going to take to actually be able to hit the ground running up there? Because my feedback from people is that your first few months in office, once you actually get up there and get an office, your first few months, they keep you so disconnected from your constituent base that
Yeah.
you don't even know what you're, not even being able to read bills, let alone know what you're doing from day to day.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan of action in place? Do you have advisors or anything that are talking about helping you with that?
I have a number of contacts that I can reach out to. It's not people that I'm like friends with by any means, but it's people who've answered my calls in the past, and and I think that they would probably be a good help. But I'm going to be honest with you, I read the room pretty well, and I don't think I'm going to have a whole lot of trouble going in there and doing what I want to do. I've already done a ton of research on what I want to do when I'm there. The CAPT Act is huge. That's what I want to push on day one. The bill is ready. I just want to get it done. I get it done, and then I can come home. I've already looked into, all of the people who were there. Mind you, now those people have to make it through their primaries, or they have to make it through their general elections and be there in January. But there's tons of people who have already pushed for similar bills as to what I'm pushing for. So it's not like I have to go there and start convincing everybody from the start that this is what needs to happen. You know, there's there's already a lot of legwork that's been done, and and whether or not I need to be a salesman to them or not, saying that this is what we should do, this is what is right, or if I take more of like the steamroller approach and just say this is what we are going to do with or without you. These bills don't need everybody to make them pass. They really don't. Uh, in a lot of cases, you know, bills get passed by very, very slim numbers, you know. And so again, I have to make it through August, and then I have to make it through November, and then I can reassess the whole plan as to what happens and who's going to be there when I get there. And I have already sent out a number of emails to a number of incumbents already, letting them know what I'm looking to do. And I'm not just like mass emailing out people, you know what I mean? I'm telling people exactly how it is. You've got senators who are there in certain districts, or you've got congressmen that are there in certain districts in other states that I've already reached out to and said this is my plan and this is what I'm going to do. And some of it might be a sales job. You know, you
Well, yeah, I mean, any
when you
piece of
reach out
legislation is.
when you reach out to these people, you're asking them to vote against their paycheck. You're asking them to vote against their job. Vote against their career service, as you will. And you sometimes you got to sell it like this. Hey, you're a congressman now. How does senator sound? you know it's as simple as that. Because if we impose term limits, let's say we impose term limits now before January even happened, we're looking at over 75% turnover. If we did a 3-term in the House and 2-term in the Senate, with no grandfather clause, no exceptions, you know what I mean? If you already served those terms, you're out. You'd see over a 75% turnover, and that's what we need. That is what's going to eliminate the corruption within there, is when people like you and me step up and just say that we've had enough. We're done with it. We know that they're not going to vote themselves out of this job or out of this paycheck, so we have to do it for them. And
Well,
when enough of us get up in there and do that, that's it. It's in my eyes, like that's a revolution. You know what I mean?
the
That
reality is the reality of what you're saying is so obvious. When if you could, and I'm not interested in it. They always, and this is no offense to the present company. The person who seeks the power the most is the person you least want to have the power, and it's the person who wants the power the least that you most desire to have the power. And
yeah,
in this case, a position. Like I don't want there. I was political in the sense of wanting political office years ago, and I have no desire for it now. But if you could take someone that's at my income level and tell them, look, we're going to have you go to the House of Representatives for 2 terms or 3 terms, whatever you decide the cap is. and each year that you're there, you're going to make $174,000. I'd be like, I will do whatever you want legally.
Yeah.
I will go up there and I will fight for the people of my district, my constituents, like with a hairbrush against, invading commando armies.
Yeah.
That's what I'll do for that kind of money, because most of us don't get to work only 180 days and come anywhere near that much money, plus all the added perks. They go
Yeah.
up there now, they see it that first year, and for them it's like, I deserve this. I
Yeah.
deserve this kind of pay. And in fact, I deserve more. And
Yeah.
that's the mentality on both the left and the right, the red and the blue. They all go up there and they think they're owed that position and they are owed that much money and more.
Yeah.
And the rest of us are like, give me half of that. I'll do the job. I'll do the job for
Yeah.
half of that, and I could still afford to pay my bills.
Yeah.
Like, and
Well, with part of what I've got in the CAPT Act, I mean, let's be honest, the way the government shuts down, they would only get paid half that. you know, uh,
right.
we pay them during shutdowns. That's a failure to govern. You can't just say, well, we couldn't come to the right terms here. You know what I mean? It's simple budgeting. Simple
Well,
budgeting.
try that with
And
your boss. Like, hey,
oh
I know
yeah,
you wanted a 40-hour work week from me this week, but the best I'm going to be able to give you is 15 hours. But I'm going to go ahead
yeah,
and demand that you go ahead and pay
yeah. You
all of that 40 hours to me.
Yeah, this is I bring this up quite a bit too. So Congress typically works, it's 140 days depending on the year, 138, whatever. Senate works just a few more days than that. That's 140 days though. Let's just run on that number. You work a full-time job. You know how many days a week or how many days a year you work? It's about 250.
Yep.
That's given you've got just weekends off and you don't take months off for vacation. So you're working, roughly 250 days a year. Well, what would your boss say to you if you were like, man, I'm only showing up for 138 this year, but I want full pay? Not to mention I want per diem every single day. I want my health benefits. I want all of it, but I'm only going to work a part-time job. And I'd tell you to kick rocks, man. Find a new job, buddy, because, that's not how it works here in America. But for some reason, we let it work that way in our government. And I always hear this. This is the biggest thing I hear back is district days. District day. Well, they got to have district days. They have to have district days. They have to be able to do that. It's super important for them to have district days. Okay,
But then they
I
go
get
back
that.
and don't talk to anybody in their district.
Yeah, we're 7.5 years now, and Pete Stauber has never held an in-person town hall meeting. He holds telephone town hall meetings with I'm going to go ahead and just I don't know. You know what I mean? They're
Hand-selected individuals, pre-approved
hand-selected
questions.
individuals. Yes, 100%. Because I've tried to call in and talk to them about stuff. You call in, you say, hey, listen, I want to talk about term limits, and you do not get to go through with it. But if you call in, you say, hey, I really want to kiss this guy's ass about the budget money that he brought in. They're like, yeah, come on in. And that's not what a town hall is supposed to be. You're supposed to hear
Exactly.
from your constituents. You're not supposed to be able to run from questions. You're supposed to be able to ask a follow-up question to your constituent, so that when they dodge the question, you can bring them back to it and say, yo, bro, like you missed the point here. Let's get back on topic. And it just doesn't happen. So the district thing is a whole farce,
Yeah. Well, it's because they're not, some of them go into it with, a pie in the sky mentality, that they are going to represent their constituents, and they go up there and they do it. And once again, I'll just bring
Yeah.
up Thomas Massey is a really good example. He went up there and he represented his constituency.
Yeah.
The people who are actually from his district are very pissed off about what happened to him in this primary.
Yeah.
Very, very, very upset about it.
Yeah.
Because he did actually represent them. But the
Yeah.
vast majority of them go up there and they buy into the lie that all of these things we're going to tell you to do and ask you to do are all for your people. But you have to remember, it's not just your people. You also have to be worried about other people's constituents.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible, terrible, terrible system that we have set up.
Yeah.
I want to ask one one that's you've built a bit of a coalition here in Minnesota,
Yeah.
of other party outsiders who are challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
Can you tell us just briefly about that before we have you give your closing thoughts and I kick you out to go chainsaw something? Hopefully not your cat. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, I'll start with this is, I know what I can do here in my own district, and that's what I can focus on, is taking on the establishment here in my district. I can't worry about, Louisiana. I can't worry about Colorado. I can't worry about CD5 or CD6 or CD3 or CD1. You know what I mean? So as I was reaching out to all of these other incumbents within the state, and getting absolutely zero response, I started, looking into all of the candidates who were running against him. And, I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of people who look like they're just applying for a job, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. I'm not just applying for a job. And I saw that
I don't
in,
think you're wrong at all. I think it's a very real
yeah,
problem in there. And in some
yeah,
respects, you are applying for a job. You're just a lot of them are
yeah.
interviewing with the wrong people.
Yeah, well, here's the thing is that I say job, maybe I should have said club. I'm not running to join a club. You know what I mean? I want to destroy the club. That's what I want to do. So I found this in Mike Foley, who's taking on Tom Emmer. He shares a lot of the same values that I do.
Mike, you're
Uh,
invited
you
to
know,
come on, by the way.
yeah, yeah. Uh, we share a lot of the same values. We understand the corruption that's going on in government. We both want real change there, and that's the same thing with Oliver Moreland down in CD1. Uh,
Oliver's been
he
on.
yeah, I mean, he's a smart whip, and I think I wish I could say that I had more people within this group, but I don't. And there's reasons for that, but there's also to side skirt it a little bit, I was pushing for somebody over in the western part of the state. And unfortunately, I mean, it's not unfortunate. It's unfortunate that he did not get the nomination, but also, he signed the pledge saying that he wouldn't run against the endorsed candidate there, even though in the prior cycles, she did not get the endorsement and ran against him. So I was trying to court him. It seemed like we had a really good discussion one time at a town hall, and then it was just the couple days after that the endorsement process happened, and he had to drop out, so I wasn't able to fill that. But man, if that would have been 4 districts out of the 8 here in Minnesota, that would have been great. But I'm going to be honest with you, it's not just here in Minnesota. I know people who are running all across the United States who are looking to get in and make actual change, uh, you know, in our government. We know that it's broken. We're not looking to get in and be the status quo for this establishment that keeps running the way it does. We want to shake it up. I'm hesitant to say it, but there's a cautionary tale about a guy in Colorado who owned a muffler shop, who got pushed around by his local government just a little too
Marvin,
hard.
Marvin.
It was- I'm not advocating for that, but what I am
I
saying
just
is
like I
that
don't advocate for anybody who's looking for copper to
yeah,
go looking for
find a
4 pounds of
find a
copper
flaw.
in flock cameras. I'm just saying that 4
Yeah,
pounds of copper exists in every flock camera. So
yeah. So there's a like I said, it's a cautionary tale. But if you twisted that tail around into another fashion, that's what I want to do with our government. I'm tired of being screwed over by them. I just want real change so that my children have an actual future here in this country. That's what it is. You know, um, I think too many of us are tired of getting pushed around by our government the way we have been, and it's it,
oh,
it's it's gross. That
I
we're
I think
allowing
that
it the way that we do.
I think you're a little and I say this in respect. I think you're a little blind in that too many people are tired of being pushed around. I don't
Yeah.
think it's nearly enough, and I don't think it's not nearly as many as some of us would assume because people like me in particular, I run in a group. If I'm affiliated with a group of people who
Mm,
themselves are tired of being pushed around, and so we do find ourselves surrounded by the vast majority of people in our circle. Our
yeah.
Venn diagrams overlap with other people who are tired of being pushed around. But then when you talk to people outside of your Venn diagram, outside of your circle, the vast majority of them were like, "No, I want to be governed harder." The the
Yeah.
the Republicans are, we're small government authoritarianism. No, you're not. You're just you're
It's what they
just
used
literally
to be.
not. They never were. The Republican
Well,
Party from the outset has always been an authoritarian dictatorship tyranny party.
yeah.
I mean, Lincoln's the reason our republic fell apart, and they
Yeah.
and the Republicans have loved him for it ever since. And the Democrats, they want as much freedom as possible until it comes to you having freedom to do things, and they want the power to be able to tell you what to do. And
Yeah.
so when you talk to those two segments, and there's an argument going on in the chat, which is great. I love it, guys. Keep arguing in the chat. I love to see people. I do. I love it. I love seeing the debate and the argument. But the reality is that it's, as I said at the beginning, it's not a two-party system that's the problem. It's the uniparty system.
Yeah.
They're all in on it. Every single
Yeah.
one of them, they're all in on it. They're all in on the failure. And it's the people who are the victims. It's
Yeah.
the Democrats are victims of their own party, and the Republicans are a victim of their own party, but yet they keep fighting for that system that's broken and it's corrupt and has been that way for a very, very long time. And when you step outside of that and you come in as an Anthony Hamilton or an Oliver or what's your other friend,
Mike Foley.
Mike. Sorry, I forgot his name. Once again, Mike, you're more than happy to have you on if you'd like to come on. And you step outside and you recognize what the problem is, and then you step into the problem and you say, "Hey guys, by the way, this is on fire over here." You have now become the problem for pointing out what the problem is.
Yeah.
And so, like, back to finish the thought. You see the problem, therefore you assume a lot more people do, and they just don't. The Minnesota
Yeah.
Republican Party
Well,
is a perfect example of not understanding what the problem is. And that's why I said what
Yeah.
I said in the beginning.
yeah.
This is the last gasp for the Minnesota Republican Party. Like, if they don't figure it
Yeah.
out in this election cycle, they might as well just pack it up and hand it all over to the Democrats, because that's what they're
Yeah.
doing.
I meant it just a slightly bit differently than that. Not that I'm not agreeing with that at all. But what I guess what I meant was it only takes a very, very small fraction of our population as a whole to overthrow a government. And again, I'm not saying that that's what we need to come to here. We shouldn't raise arms against our government. I think that there's better ways that we can go about it. But it would be just a small fraction of the population is all that it would take to I mean, this is all hypothetical. If our government was to use military force against us, which I don't think that they necessarily would, because you'd have to be having people from your own communities come in and take on people from your own communities. I
But
think it
they
would fall
have,
apart
by the
before it
way.
got to
So
that
I mean,
point.
you're
Yeah,
not wrong for bringing it up as an example, because our government has used force
Yeah.
against us
yep.
multiple
But
times.
I mean,
Just ask the
if we were on like a revolutionary stance, you know what I mean? It's such a small part of our population is what would do it. You could have
well,
99% of our population sit on the sidelines while 1% went in and overthrew a government. And that would be more than enough people to make something like that happen. So I'm not advocating for that. Again, let me be clear about that. Not advocating
no,
for it. I'm
no,
just
it's
saying as a hypothetical,
you don't have to nuance, because
Yeah.
people understand. I mean, it's been a part of the public dialogue for years of what does it mean for a people to throw off the chains of oppression the way
Mhm.
we did in 1776 as we celebrated. I mean, that's what the whole point of celebrating July 4th is all about, by the way, folks, is rising up against tyranny.
Yeah.
Once you've exhausted all of the other outlets. That's
Yeah.
and that was the argument of the founding fathers, was like, we've tried everything. We've sent delegations, we've written letters,
Mhm.
we didn't even want to be separate from Great Britain. People don't understand that. It wasn't like these upstarts just one day said, we don't even want to be British anymore. They literally wanted to remain British. They just
Mhm.
wanted to be treated like they were British.
Yeah.
And the British wouldn't treat them like they were British. So they petitioned, please treat us like the British, like all your other British people. Nope, not going
Yeah.
to do that. And so they finally
Yeah.
said, fine, if you're not going to treat us like British and honor us for being your citizens, then we'll be our own citizens. Screw you. And that was 3% of the population. And even
Yeah.
that 3% didn't want to take up arms. They just wanted liberty.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that's
and they
why
weren't
it
even for
wasn't
it. That was
it
the
wasn't the colonials that fired the first shot. It was the
Yeah.
Brits that fired the first shot. And then the colonials
Yeah.
said, oh, you done screwed the pooch now, because we know
Yeah.
how to hunt rabbits.
Yeah. Yeah. That was, that's the other part of it, is that it wasn't like a trained militia that took on the British. It really wasn't. If you looked at George Washington's army, I mean, it was people of all age ranges, from very young men at that point in time, to elderly people who were fighting against these. They were farmers. They
Yeah.
weren't trained military people. It was people who could hunt. It was small groups of people who were actually like marksmen and stuff like that. But it yeah, it didn't. It wasn't this well organized, well planned, well thought out. Took decades to assemble and train
Right.
and properly. I remember it was a book 1776. I'm trying to remember who wrote that one, McCullen or something. I can't remember. Uh, they were talking about how at one point in time George Washington was taking inventory of what they had, and it was something like they only had enough for 7 shots for every soldier or something like that. That's the gunpowder that they had. Was 7 shots for every soldier, and that's a small that's a small amount.
Yeah.
When you're talking about taking on the British Army. So
And that's the thing, is like, people are so afraid to even talk about it. Like, if you talk about it, you sound like, in their mind, you sound like you're glorifying potential violence, and we're saying, like, the adage, everybody's like, we literally threw off the chains of Great Britain over 2-cent tax on tea.
yeah, well, I don't think it was even the tea. The tea was a pushing point, but it was a Stamp Act, I think, is really what did it, right?
Right,
Where
but
they
that's
where they
it's really, we always point back to the Boston Tea Party as this,
Yeah.
like, people were like, literally, like, you want to, no, we're not going, you know what, screw your tea, we'll drink coffee.
Yeah.
It's what.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
it's what it came down to. And now it's like, oh, you want to surveil us everywhere we go, okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's the reality. Like, nobody I know and that I would affiliate with is out there advocating, let's go start, armed resistance against
Right.
whatever
Right.
administration we don't like.
Yeah.
It's the fringe on the left and the fringe on the right that will do that, but only if the wrong party's in power. The rest of us
Yeah.
are over here saying, just stop pushing us around, stop passing more and more laws. There's so many
Yeah.
laws right now. Like, I guarantee you, we violated at least 3 felony laws at some point today. Which
Yeah.
is
Right.
and that's what people are tired of. When, like, the small government party is not small government, and the party for the people, which is supposed to be all about everybody being treated equally, doesn't really want everybody all treated equally. They they just don't. And the rest of us are in the middle going, can we stop treating us like the kids in a divorce, please? Like,
Yeah.
we don't,
Yeah.
none
No
of you
kidding.
get custody of us. We
Yeah.
want to be emancipated. So
Yeah. They're not the boss. That's the thing, is that we treat our government like they're the boss, and they're not. Like, we're the boss.
yeah, we the
tell
people
them
are to
what to do.
blame. We are to blame
Yeah.
for what's happening. No, like there's no
Yeah.
like if you don't like what's happening, point the finger at
Yeah.
yourself first. That's where it
Yeah.
starts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So
Well,
just real quick, tell everybody where they can find you and how they can
yeah.
help if they're interested in helping, or how they can get a hold of you if they have important
Yeah.
questions other than the rambling that I did today.
Or I. Okay, so you can find me Anthony Hamilton for Congress.com. I've got a portal on there if you want to donate money. It's the WinRed portal there. I would, sure, money helps, but what's going to help more is votes. If you're in CD8 or you're in Mike Foley's district or you're in Oliver Moreland's district, that's where the change is going to come from. Again, it's we have an open primary here in Minnesota. So, when you go to vote in the primaries, it doesn't matter if you're libertarian, if you're Republican, if you're Democratic, you can vote for who you want, where you want. And that's your right. So if you want to see real change, we can make that change in August. We don't have to wait till November to try and see what happens.
Absolutely.
That would be my biggest thing. You can find me on Facebook. That's probably where I'm the most active. Just Anthony Hamilton for Congress there. I'm also on
Considering
X.
you never had social media until you decided to do this.
Yeah. That's been a learning curve. A lot of times I go and post something. I'm like, but no, delete. I did it wrong. I don't know what I'm doing.
I said way too much or not enough. I can't tell. Oh.
So yeah, you can
Well,
find me in any of those. Again, your vote is what's going to matter here. If you've liked anything I've said, if you want people to go to Washington and make real change there, it's your vote that's going to do it. And I'll be voting too.
now I feel
What's gonna
obligated
happen.
to let Pete come on and talk about why, but we know he won't.
Oh
do
yeah,
it.
no, feel free. Let him on. Give him the invite. I've given him several. But I think he's busy. So
Two groups of people will never come on my show, and I wish they would. I can never get an actual Democrat leftist who wants to come on and have a conversation with me
yeah,
because they automatically assume I'm a Trumpist, mega, and I'm not, like by any stretch of the imagination. And most of the insiders won't talk to me at all. And
yeah,
occasionally, I'll invite somebody that's hardcore mega on, and they won't. So other than that,
yeah.
I get everybody. But well, I appreciate your time. Go chainsaw your. It's funny now that we're getting ready to kick you off. Now your internet's cleared up enough that you're not as blurry as you've been the whole time. So
Oh, seriously? Oh,
yeah,
geez. I didn't. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Yeah, my bad.
No, not your bad.
God,
It's not your
yeah,
fault that they have to bring it in on a
I know.
Chinese
On the
supply
wagons.
chain. Yeah, Chinese supply chain through Wells Fargo wagon.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Well,
listen, thank you very much for having me on here. If you got time again, maybe make it through the primaries. We can do it again then or beforehand or whatever. There's so much more I want to talk about. So
well,
I had a great time here.
and tell Foley that seriously. Tell him I'm if he's interested, he can
Yeah.
reach out to me, and I'm gladly have him on to hear him talk about his run against Emmer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again very much.
Yeah, go chainsaw your stuff. I'll say all sorts of terrible things about you and ruin your chance of getting elected after you get off the stream. So
Sounds good. Hey, you're not the only one. It's all right.
thanks a lot,
All
Anthony.
right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, folks. I love having people on who are challenging from the outside and trying to unseat the insiders. I don't care who they are. And again, I'd have a Democrat on. I have libertarians on. I have outside, libertarian leaning Republicans. I have outsider Republicans on. I have unaffiliated independents on. There's just a certain segment of people that they don't want to talk about their positions. They don't want to talk about what moves them or motivates them. And I think a lot of times it's because they're afraid that they either don't know what's motivating them or moving them, and they don't know how to talk about it, or they're afraid if they do talk about what motivates them or moves them, it'll expose them for who they are. And, it's the way it is. And if I had it my way, we'd do away with the endorsement process altogether for political candidates, and everybody would go straight to the primary. And but the system, the way it is, it's set up to keep dissident voices out as much as possible. Democrats don't want dissident voices in their party. The Republicans don't want dissident voices in their party. And, as like, I don't like the politics of Bernie Sanders. I don't like it. He's a self-admitted Marxist. I don't like his politics, but he was a dissident voice in his own party, and look at how they treated him. I absolutely respect and admire Ron Paul and his political positions. But he was a dissident voice, and look how they treated him. Thomas Massey, massive amount of respect for that man. Look at the way they treated him for being a dissident voice. Folks, wake up, become a dissident voice. You don't have to run for office, but just become a dissident voice. Stop holding your nose and looking at the two-party system, the uniparty, and thinking to yourself that somehow your half of the uniparty system is the right half. It's the correct half, and it's the one that's going to fix everything. Folks, they've been at it together for over a century, and nothing they've done has made any of us more free or any better off financially, economically, at all. They're all in on it together. And we need outsiders, and we need dissident voices. And I will talk to any dissident. And I'll talk to any insider that wants to push back against the idea that we need dissident voices. I'll talk to anybody that thinks that you need to have party loyalty to win. I will talk to anybody who thinks you just have to hold your nose and vote for the lesser of two evils and thinks that that's a win. Because you've already defeated your own argument, because when you say you got to vote for the lesser of two evils, you're already admitting that you're voting for evil, which means you already admitted that you know it's a failure. But the cognitive dissonance is such a reality for you that you can't even understand how terribly flawed your logic is. So I really appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're watching this on playback, please hit that hype button and get this out in the stream. I'd love for Anthony's appearance to, get some traction. I think he's a great voice, and I guarantee if we, had several hours, I would have asked a lot more when it comes to policy. But I wanted people to hear what moved him, what motivated him, and to see how he thinks on the fly when it comes to being asked questions. And I think he did a good job, especially, not having any preparatory questions handed to him. Like, here's what we're going to talk about. So go check him out. He's on Facebook. He's got a website, and he's worth taking a look at, even if he's not in your district, because maybe it can help you determine how you are going to vote in your primaries, or what you can do to vote in your primaries. Just because someone's endorsed, just because someone has a D behind their name and an R behind their name, doesn't necessarily mean you have to support them, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they are the right person for the job. And the more we realize that, the sooner we realize that, the better off we'll all be. So until next time, my friends, fight for your freedom, it is yours. Fight for your liberty, it belongs to you. And as always, sic semper tyrannis.
We are going for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.